Hello. Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, I got nothing, you guys. I got nothing. Man, there is like so fuck. Anyhow. Well, I'm getting starting to get closer to finishing the story board. Anyways, not the story, but the storyboard. It looks like I'm probably about 2/3 of the way done, maybe more. And yeah, once I get that done, then I'll figure it out from there. I haven't even thought that far ahead. Anyway, yeah, not much going on. I checked BitChute and nothing, dude, nothing. I can't believe how all I do with BitChute is watch it progressively get worse and worse and worse. I guess. So, all right. There's a few things I wanted to talk about that are just random shit. So I'll just randomly start with one of them. All right. So I watched somebody put up a video about dogs, and if if dogs are good in a shit hits the fan scenario, and then so I participated a little bit in the discussion, just kind of talking the little bit that I know about dogs. But there's some things that I've learned, accidentally discovered about dogs that are very crazy. So I'll tell you this story. This was like, I don't know, 8 years ago, 9 years ago. Somebody wanted me to babysit their Akita. Akita is a Japanese bear dog. They're called a Japanese bear dog or an Akita. And they're really cool dogs, right? They're huge. They're fucking massive dogs. And they're fucking badass, right? So, and this woman was going to pay me a lot of money to watch her dog. And I have I lived in a big enough area to where I could do it. It's not going to be that big of a problem as far as that goes, right? So I agreed to watch this Akita, Japanese bear dog. And so then she's like, okay, well, I'm going to come over. I want to introduce you to the dog first before blah, blah, blah. And, it kind of went like this. There was a little bit of coordinating a week prior or whatever. But anyways, I think she ended up kind of flaking on introducing me to the dog until the day of. So then she shows up so the day she drops the dog off, she leaves the dog in her car and comes in and talks to me, and we talk for a little bit, and she explains to me some important things about the dog, which of course is part of the deal. So, and so then she explains to me that Akitas are pack animals, like wolves and shit like this. And so because it's a pack animal, there's certain things that I needed to do, and one of this is what she explained. She's like, when I introduce the dog to you, do not look at the dog, do not touch the dog, and do not talk to the dog. I can't remember its name. And she explained how the reason for this is because Akitas are pack animals, and pack animals are always trying to establish themselves as the alpha of the pack, whatever pack they're in. They're one of their main instincts as a pack animal is to assert themselves as the alpha of the pack. And so this is why I'm not supposed to look at the dog, I'm not supposed to touch the dog, and I'm not supposed to talk to the dog. And that the dog needs to make physical contact with me first before I look at, talk to you, and pet the dog. It needs to make physical contact with me first. And by doing so, that's that dog's way of submitting to the beta role. And that if I don't do this, then the dog is going to think that it is the alpha, that it's the leader of the pack. And so it's going to act like it owns my house and that I'm the beta of the house and it's the alpha and all this, right? And so, I don't know any of this stuff, but I'm getting paid really good. So I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever, man. I mean, I don't know. It sounded kind of goofy to me, but what do I know about Akita dogs and pack animals and shit? I don't know nothing. So she's like, okay, so we're clear? I'm like, yeah, all right. And so then she brings the Akita in, and we talk for a little bit more, and then she leaves. And so it's just me and the Akita. And the whole time, I never looked at the Akita, except for in my peripheral. But I never directly looked at it. I didn't touch it. And I didn't talk to it, and it didn't touch me. And so then she leaves, okay? And I'm supposed to maintain this role of like, I do not look at the dog, do not touch the dog, and do not talk to the dog. And Japanese bear dogs are pretty scary, dude. Like, that dog could have easily killed me. So I had to maintain this. So I went to my laptop, and I just sat at my laptop and just kind of messed around on the computer, and I would just watch the Japanese bear dog from my peripheral. And it spent a bunch of time like walking all around my place. I had a big studio. It was like 2 stories. It was like 2,000 plus square foot area. And it went upstairs, so there was even more. It was a big. I lived in a big studio, and so this Japanese bear dog is scanning the whole area, right? And the whole time it's like looking at me, and the whole time I just sat quietly at my laptop, didn't look at it, didn't talk to it, didn't touch it, and it took probably about at least 30 minutes before that Akita finally started to gradually make its way a little bit closer and a little bit closer, right? And it was kind of scary, dude, I got to admit. And then finally, it got up, and it just kind of just barely nuzzled my knee with its nose. Like just a little bit, enough to where I knew that it was putting its nose and nuzzling my knee. And so then I turned and I pet it and I don't, whatever name it was, I said, hey, what's up, man? Pet it and stuff. And it was the most amazing thing, because as soon as that happened, that dog became 100% loyal to me. It was the craziest thing. It was like, it was so loyal to me, and it was so well behaved. And like, if I would go somewhere, it would come with me, even into the bathroom. Like the first time I noticed, I went to the bathroom, and then here comes the dog wandering into the bathroom, but very well behaved, almost like human, like these fucking very intelligent, And then like when I went to sleep, it didn't jump up on my bed. It was very well behaved. Like it went to the foot of the bed and laid down at the foot of the bed. It followed me to my bed and then laid down at the foot of the bed. Wherever I went, it went with me. Then like someone would knock at the door, and that fucking Japanese bear dog would be like, all of a sudden it's like ready to fucking kill somebody. And it was so amazing, because it was like that dog had known me, like I was the one that raised it. That's how loyal it became to me. So like, so I was just talking about this in this discussion, discussion about dogs and shit hits the fan scenarios. And I was explaining how people don't understand how much responsibility goes into pack animals like that, like German shepherds, Akitas, pit bulls, all these kinds of dogs. Like they need to be, they need a certain type of, like that lady telling me, don't look at it, don't touch it, don't talk. Like there is a lot that goes into these pack animal breeds, and if you want if you want your dog to listen to you, you have to be very, very conscious of how you address the animal. And so I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, this is exactly what shadow integration is about. So your shadow archetype is basically like that Japanese Akita, that Japanese bear dog. That's what your shadow archetype is. And depending on how conscious you are on addressing your shadow archetype will dictate how your shadow archetype um, you know um, assimilates and stuff to part of you, because it's part of you. So it's the same kind of thing. Like if so, the woman was emphasizing that I'm very conscious about these things, that I do not look at the dog, do not touch the dog, do not talk to the dog. So I had to make a conscious effort to do exactly what she said, rather than just not really care and just do whatever I want. See, now if I hadn't have done what that lady said, that dog would have acted like, that I'm the beta and that the dog is the alpha. This is exactly the way integrating the shadow archetype works the same, is being consciously aware of the shadow archetype. And again, the shadow archetype is like that Japanese bear dog. And the shadow archetype can never become the alpha archetype within a person. And for the same reason, you don't want a Japanese bear dog to become the alpha in your relationship with the Japanese bear dog. But relationship, that's one of the key things. Is so shadow integration involves having a conscious relationship with my shadow archetype, having a conscious relationship with it, instead of just not even paying any attention at all. Again, going back to the Akita, if I hadn't paid attention to what that woman said, then I'd have been like, that woman's crazy. I know dogs. I've been around dogs all my life. Blah blah blah. Well, dude, I'm telling I can't, dude. It was so amazing watching that Akita bear dog, that dog. Like, it became abnormally loyal to me, as if I were its owner. But she warned me that if I didn't do that, if I didn't take her direction, that Japanese bear dog would have never became loyal to me or any of it. It would have just been like a big clusterfuck. And this is the same concept with shadow integration, like the shadow archetype. That's all that the shadow is. The shadow can be whatever, depending on the person. And if a person is consciously aware of their shadow and takes direction to cultivate like a healthy relationship with the shadow, well, then the shadow is like that dog, where the dog becomes 100% loyal and assumes its role as the beta, and accepts its role as the beta. See, then it's useful. Just like that dog became totally useful. Like when someone would knock at the door, the bear dog would be ready to kill him in defense of me, because I'm the alpha, right? And so this is the way the shadow archetype works. Like, shadow isn't a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. What makes it bad is like ignoring. If you aren't taking conscious efforts, like that woman told me, I had to be very conscious about not talking to the dog, not looking at the dog, and not touching the dog. I had to be very conscious about that. And so if a person is being very conscious about their shadow archetype, the shadow archetype will work to the person's advantage, just like that bear dog became totally loyal to me. It's the same thing. So the shadow isn't necessarily a bad thing. But see, that's what people assume it is. That's why they ignore the shadow. They suppress the shadow archetype and ignore it and pretend like they don't have that. That's not part of who they are, blah, blah, blah. And all that does is make everything worse, you know. Whereas that's what shadow integration means, is like building a healthy relationship with my shadow archetype. Just like the woman directed me on how to build a healthy relationship with the Japanese bear dog. It's the same. It's the exact identical concept. And by building a conscious and healthy relationship with my shadow archetype is how I use my shadow archetype to my advantage. But if I don't do that, if I neglect cultivating a healthy working relationship with my shadow archetype, that's when the potential danger of the shadow assuming the alpha role within the person. And if a person is not aware of their shadow archetype can become the dominant alpha archetype within a person. And that's what happens when you see people flip out and stuff and like go postal and start. That's because their shadow archetype has taken the alpha role within that person. But if a person if a person were to, instead of allow the shadow archetype, if a person were instead of allowing the shadow archetype to become the dominant alpha archetype within the person, if instead they cultivated that and to where the shadow archetype understood it was the beta, it wasn't the alpha archetype, then the shadow archetype can be just like that bear dog. Imagine having an Akita bear dog like that, where it was totally 100% loyal to you. It was super well behaved. It always obeyed. I mean, you didn't even have to ask it to obey. It would just obey, you know. And like I said, when someone's at the door, the Akita's ready to defend you at any and all costs. It'll fucking sacrifice its own life to defend you. This is the way the shadow integration works, where the shadow archetype is totally advantageous. But people assume that the shadow archetype is not advantageous at all. That's why they suppress it and ignore it, and they don't interact with it at all. And so they're not conscious. They reject having a conscious awareness of their shadow archetype, and as a result, that's how the shadow archetype explodes. It'll seep in, and it will, you know, take over to varying degrees, you know. And so, but yeah, so I realized that after like talking about this experience I had with the Akita bear dog, is that this is a perfect example of the way the shadow archetype works. The shadow archetype has that same pack animal instinct as an Akita or a pit bull, or all these kind of breeds are the same. They're all pack animal breeds, like the pit bulls and the Rottweilers and Doberman Pinschers and all those types of dogs that everybody likes to have. Those are all pack animals, and they have their instinct is to be the alpha in the pack. It's the exact same thing with the shadow archetype within each of us. And you don't want it to be the alpha, and there's a lot of good reasons. Like, think of it like this way, you know, who is going to be feeding the Akita? Well, I am. You know, if I own an Akita, I'm the one that's going to be taking care of it. And if it assumes the alpha role, it's harmful to the dog. This is why it's important to establish the alpha role with breeds like that, because if they think that they're the alpha, imagine if you had a an Akita and then you just let the Akita make all the decisions in your life and everything. Well, you'd have shit all over the floor. You'd be shitting on the floor with them. You'd be eating the dog food out of the dog thing. I mean, who's going to go buy the fucking dog food? You know, what's going to happen? You're both going to die if you start acting like the Akita and allowing the Akita to be the alpha and you're the beta. The dog's just you're both gonna die. And if you like the dog and love the dog and want to take care of a dog like that, that dog has to understand that they're the beta and that you're the alpha, because that's how you take care of the dog. That's how you know, because if you let the dog become the alpha, it's gonna think it can do whatever it wants, and next thing you know, it's gonna run out into traffic and get run over by a fucking semi or something. See, it's not fair to those breed of dog. It's not fair to them, you know, to allow that type of dog to become the alpha. It's not fair to them because they're going to get run over by a semi, or you know, the animal control is going to pick them up because they're they're not doing, you know, they're not blah blah blah. It's the same with the shadow archetype. It's not fair to the shadow archetype to ignore it and suppress it and all this other stuff. Because of that same reason. Whereas if just like with the Akita bear dog, if I did the same thing with my shadow archetype, then it's fair to the shadow archetype, and as a result, the shadow is beneficial to me. My archetype is beneficial to me as long as it's you know, established as the beta archetype, that it is not the dominant archetype. Just like establishing with the bear dog, the bear dog is not the dominant person or the dominant entity in this relationship, and a lot of that is to care for the sake of the dog, because you know the dog isn't the alpha, and if you allowed the dog to be the alpha, your whole life would be in shambles. You know, you'd be acting like a fucking dog. Exactly the same with shadow archetype. And so it's not that the shadow archetype is a bad thing. And that's what the whole purpose of shadow integration is by integrating the shadow becomes a very beneficial and useful. Just like that dog, it becomes loyal to you. But you got to take care of it. You got to, you know, same with the Akita. You got to understand that Akitas are pack animals with this instinct. And then by establishing yourself as the alpha is caring for that dog. It's the same with the shadow archetype. Cultivating, acknowledging the shadow archetype, cultivating and integrating it into life. And then your archetype, that shadow archetype, becomes as loyal as that dog, where it just becomes like it's down for the cause. It's down with you. It's totally accepted of you as the alpha, and that the shadow archetype is the beta. And so, anyways, it's something I wanted to talk about because I didn't realize that until I had that discussion about dogs. I was like, wow. That story about that about the Akita bear dog is exactly the whole idea about shadow integration, you know, the shadow archetype. So, anyways, I got a lot of other video shit that I need to do, which I'm always procrastinating as far as the storyboard goes, you know. Well, I guess, and in relation to the storyboard, you know, this is a person that never had cultivated any kind of relationship at all with their shadow archetype, and that's how she totally flipped out and got involved with fucking witch cults and murder and arson and just like totally just like demon possessed. That's allowing the shadow archetype to become the alpha archetype is demon possession. That's what demon possession is. Whereas shadow integration is, it's like the same integration process as I went through with that Akita bear dog, that Japanese bear dog, that Akita. It was the same. As long as I'm consciously aware and I have direction and focus on what am I doing with this Akita bear dog, and I integrate in a healthy way so that the bear dog isn't taking over my house and becoming the alpha, for the sake of the dog. Like, I have to take care of the dog. That dog ain't going to take care of me. So if I let it become the alpha, well, then we're both fucked, me and the dog, But and the same with the shadow archetype. If I allow the shadow archetype to become the alpha, then both my dark side and my side that's light we're both fucked. Whereas if I integrate the shadow, then we can work together. Crazy shit. I love it. Anyways, whatever.